Engines on Sir Topham Hatt's railway love Brendam docks. There's always lots of work to keep them busy, and they enjoy seeing new arrivals onto the island of Sodor. An exciting new arrival was an engine Cranky the Crane was unloading. It was heavy. "This makes my chain ache," groaned Cranky. "This is Harvey, the crane engine," Sir Topham Hatt said proudly. The other engines thought Harvey looked strange. Harvey was happy to be on the ground. He didn't like dangling from Cranky's arm at all. "These gentlemen are the railway board," Sir Topham Hatt said. "Tomorrow, Harvey will give them a demonstration. If it goes well, he will join the railway." "What's a dimmer station?" "Demonstration," said Thomas. "It's when you show off what you can do." "Like when Thomas and I have a race," said Bertie. "Vroom, vroom." That evening, Thomas had just returned from a hard day's work. He saw Harvey parked near the sheds. Harvey could hear the other engines talking about him. This made him sad. "Harvey's different," said Henry. "He doesn't even look like an engine," said Edward. "Surely Sir Topham Hatt won't let him pull coaches," sniffed Gordon. "He's just Cranky on wheels," said James. "He's not taking my mail," said Percy. Thomas felt sorry for Harvey. "Don't worry. Sometimes it takes time to make new friends." But Harvey wasn't sure he wanted to stay where no one wanted him. The next morning, Sir Topham Hatt sent the engines off to a useful day's work. "Maybe my coming here wasn't such a good idea, sir," Harvey chuffed sadly. "Nonsense," said Sir Topham Hatt. "But the engines don't like me. I'm too different." "Different is what makes you special." And that made Harvey feel better. Out on the branch line, Percy was having trouble with the trucks. Faster we go, pull 'em along, don't let 'em slow." "Help!" cried Percy. His driver applied the brakes. But it was too late. He went off the rails at Bulgy's bridge. Luckily, no one was hurt. Bertie arrived and was pleased Percy was all right, but he was also very cross. "You've blocked the road," Bertie snapped. He was worried he wouldn't get the gentlemen of the railway board to the demonstration on time. When Sir Topham Hatt heard the news, he went straight to Harvey. "I need you to rescue one of my engines." "I'll do my best, sir," Harvey said bravely, and he set off immediately. Harvey soon arrived and went to work. In no time, Percy was back on the tracks. The gentlemen of the railway board were very impressed. "That was the best demonstration of all. The gentlemen of the railway board have decided you shall join the railway." "Oh, thank you, sir," said Harvey proudly. That night, Harvey heard the engines talking again. This time it was different. "Well done, Harvey," said Gordon. "Very useful," said James. "You can take my mail," said Percy. "You see," said Thomas, "different can be good." All the engines agreed. "Welcome to the Sodor Railway," they called. Harvey smiled happily. The engines on the island of Sodor love the summer. Sir Topham Hatt arranges lots of concerts. Music can often be heard drifting through the air. The engines do enjoy it. One morning, the engines were very excited. Alicia Bhatti, the famous singer, was coming to the island of Sodor. "She's a coloratura," said Gordon importantly. "What's a coloratura?" asked Thomas. "It means she can sing high notes very, very loud." "Sir Topham Hatt will choose me to collect her," boasted James. "I'm the brightest and the shiniest." "Nonsense, I'm the most important," huffed Gordon. Thomas wanted to feel important too. "He might choose me," he said hopefully. "Well, one thing's for sure," said Gordon. "He won't choose Dirty Percy." "Don't call me Dirty Percy," he chuffed crossly, and he wheeshed away. But the next day, Sir Topham Hatt didn't choose Gordon, and he didn't choose James. He chose Thomas. "Make sure Annie and Clarabelle are squeaky clean," he said. "Yes, sir," said Thomas proudly. He felt very important indeed. "Move aside, Dirty Percy," chuffed Thomas. "I'm the important engine today." "But I need a washdown," wailed Percy. "My passengers will laugh at me." "But I have to be squeaky clean," huffed Thomas. "So you'll just have to wait." "I can't wait," grumped Percy. "I'm a guaranteed connection," and he chuffed away. Soon Thomas was shiny and squeaky clean. He felt more important than ever. But as the workers coupled Annie and Clarabelle, they heard a strange sound. "What's that?" asked Thomas anxiously. His driver quickly oiled Annie and Clarabelle's undercarriage. "That should take care of the bothersome squeak," he said. On the way to the docks, Thomas heard the squeak again. He was worried. It didn't sound like his squeaky clean squeak. Thomas squeaked noisily into the quayside, where Alicia Bhatti was waiting. Sir Topham Hatt held Clarabelle's door open when, "A mouse!" Alicia Bhatti screamed. And she screamed, and she screamed, and she screamed. She screamed so loud and so long that windows broke all over town. "Definitely a coloratura," said Gordon. Alicia Bhatti was cross. "I can't possibly travel in coaches riddled with mice." Sir Topham Hatt was very embarrassed, and Thomas didn't feel important at all. Just then, Percy returned from his guaranteed connection. "Look at the little green engine," Alicia Bhatti exclaimed. "So sweet and dirty, like a proper steam engine." "But he's filthy," Gordon huffed snootily. "But I clean up nice," smiled Percy. He was glad somebody noticed. Alicia Bhatti boarded the train, and Percy steamed away. He felt very proud. Later, Thomas saw Percy at the washdown. "I'm sorry I called you Dirty Percy," said Thomas. "You go first." "Thanks, Thomas. It feels good to be friends," said Percy. "But where is your mouse?" "You'll see," grinned Thomas. That night was Alicia Bhatti's concert. Her voice carried across half the island. Sir Topham Hatt had made the little mouse her very own home in the corner of Tidmouth Sheds, and Thomas named her Alicia. Sir Topham Hatt's engines love their work. Gordon likes pulling the express. Thomas likes his branch line. And Percy likes taking the mail. But none of them likes being a middle engine. It's no fun being stuck in the middle. One morning, Percy was cheerfully collecting coal cars from the smelter yards where Harry and Bert worked. They liked to play tricks on steam engines. Percy didn't want to fall for their tricks again. But before he knew it, he was stuck in the middle. "Oh, bother," chuffed Percy crossly. "Little green piggy in the middle," Harry teased. Percy's driver was cross. With coal cars in front of him and coal cars behind, Percy had to go slowly. James was in the yards when Percy steamed slowly by. "Ha ha, it's Pokey Percy," James laughed. "You wouldn't be laughing if you were stuck in the middle," Percy fumed. And he fumed all the way to the coaling plant. One by one, he shunted his coal cars onto the tipper's loading ramp, and the coal was unloaded. Percy was not allowed to cross the loading ramp until the tipper had been turned off. It was against the rules. But as soon as his driver and fireman left, there was trouble. Henry arrived to pick up coal. He bumped into the coal cars, and the coal cars bumped into Percy. Percy was pushed onto the loading ramp. "Help!" cried Percy. Percy was hoisted up, tipped over, and brought back down again. After Percy was lowered back onto the ground, the manager was very cross. "You have caused confusion and delay," he said. "I'll have to report this to Sir Topham Hatt." That night, Sir Topham Hatt spoke severely to Percy. "I'm very disappointed in you, Percy," he said. "You know it's against the rules to go on to the tipper's loading ramp." "Sorry, sir," Percy said sadly, "but it wasn't my fault. It's because those diesels made me a middle engine." "Nevertheless, you will shunt freight cars in the yards until I can get to the bottom of this." "Pah!" said James, thinking no one could hear. "I could handle those diesels with bent buffers and a busted boiler." "Then you will do Percy's run to the smelter," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Yes, sir," said James. The next day, James arrived at the smelter. He was determined not to be tricked by Harry and Bert. "Hello, James," oozed Harry. "Come to learn a thing or two from those who know?" "Just get my freight cars ready and stay out of my way," huffed James importantly. "Yes, sir," Bert chimed greasily. James cheerfully backed up to his freight cars. He was certain he had fooled Harry and Bert, but he was wrong. "Little red piggy in the middle," chortled Harry. "Just like Percy," jeered Bert. "I am not like Percy," huffed James. "I'm not a middle engine, and I'm not moving." And he didn't. When Sir Topham Hatt heard the news, he sent Percy to fetch James. This made Percy happy. He buffered up to James and took him, along with all the freight cars, to the docks. "Right on time," said the manager. "But what is that big red engine doing in the middle?" "Learning," Percy replied. "Learning what?" "Learning to be a middle engine," Percy laughed. James covered himself in steam, hoping no one would recognize him. But it was no good. There was only one big red engine on the island, and everyone knows his name is James. It was early morning on the island of Sodor. Duncan was waiting for Peter Sam, who was bringing some freight cars for him to take to Strawberry Grove. Duncan was also to take the headmaster and the new organ. While they waited, the headmaster played a lively tune. Peter Sam had steamed all through the night to bring Duncan his wagons. But as he approached the junction, a low-hanging branch knocked his whistle off. This meant he couldn't work until he got a new one. "I can't run on the tracks without my whistle," chuffed Peter Sam. "That would be too dangerous." "An engine's not an engine without a whistle," boasted Duncan. And just to prove it, he let off a big blast. But the rest of the engines just ignored him. Duncan chuffed away in a big huff. He was cross. "They're jealous of my fine whistle," Duncan huffed as he steamed through the countryside. He whistled at some sheep, but they were too busy eating grass to take notice. "Bah," said Duncan. "I need to whistle louder and longer next time." Soon Duncan approached a level crossing where Elizabeth, the quarry truck, waited with a farmer's prize bull. This time, Duncan whistled as loud and as long as he could. Said the bull. "Stop that nonsense, Duncan," Elizabeth called. Duncan carried on cheerfully down the track. But he hadn't noticed his whistle had come loose. Then Duncan saw Terence plowing a field. "He'll get the loudest and longest whistle yet," he chortled to himself. And he blew so hard, his whistle shot off like a mighty rocket and landed out of sight. Everyone searched for Duncan's whistle, but it was nowhere to be seen. "We're stuck," said his driver. "We can't move without a whistle. It would be too dangerous." "Leave it to me," the headmaster said. For the rest of the day, Duncan didn't make a sound. But the headmaster's organ did. As Duncan delivered his freight cars, the headmaster tooted the organ at every crossing and every stop. It alerted everyone just as well as a whistle would, although Duncan didn't think so. Finally, Duncan finished delivering the last of his freight cars. Duncan steamed quietly back to the junction as the headmaster played the organ. "Look," Rusty teased, "it's Duncan the musical engine." "Let's whistle along," said Rheneas. Whistled Skarloey. But Peter Sam, who had a shiny new whistle, felt sorry for Duncan. "You really did well to deliver your goods without a whistle," he said. "Do you think so?" said Duncan, cheering up a bit. "Absolutely," said Peter Sam. "Even though an engine's not an engine without a whistle." "Or an organ," chuckled the headmaster, and he tooted the organ. And all the engines tooted back, except Duncan, who just grinned. The engines on the island of Sodor like feeling responsible, reliable, and really useful. They work hard to complete their jobs on time. They don't like confusion and delay. But the troublesome trucks delight in mischief, and their mischief causes trouble, as poor Henry found out. "Henry has had an accident and been sent for repairs," said Sir Topham Hatt. "There are no other engines available, so Diesel will help until Henry returns." "Yes, sir," puffed the engines, but they weren't happy. The engines didn't like Diesel. He was always being rude and always showing off. "I hope Henry's mended soon," said Percy. "He moves more trucks than 3 Diesels put together," agreed Thomas. "Trucks are no one's friends," huffed Gordon. The next day, Diesel was working at the docks. "When Sir Topham Hatt sees how good I am," he bragged to the trucks, "he'll get rid of steam engines once and for all." This gave the troublesome trucks an idea. As Diesel shunted them together, they started to sing. "Is that all you can haul? Henry's loads are longer. Is that all you can haul? Henry must be stronger." Diesel was cross. He was sure that he was stronger than Henry. "I'll push you all at the same time," he said. The trucks giggled. "Push us all, that's the longest. Push us all, you'll be the strongest." "That's me," said Diesel, "the world's strongest engine." And Diesel shunted 5 trucks together, then 10, then 15. Soon he had an enormous line of 20 trucks. "What's Diesel doing?" cried Percy. "He thinks he's the world's strongest engine," replied Thomas. Diesel didn't know the shunters had set the brakes on the trucks. The troublesome trucks knew, but encouraged Diesel to push anyway. "Push, push, push!" Diesel pushed, and he pushed, and he pushed. But the trucks didn't move, so Diesel decided to pull the trucks instead. Heave ho, you can pull, but we won't go," sang the trucks. This made Diesel very cross. He pulled, and he pulled, and he pulled. Help! "Grease and oil," Diesel sulked, as the trucks laughed and laughed. Sir Topham Hatt looked down crossly at Diesel. "I thought you would be a proper dockyard Diesel, but I was wrong," he said. "Can you make up for lost time, Henry?" "Oh, yes, sir," Henry replied happily. He backed up to the trucks and the shunters released the brakes. Then Henry pulled away as easy as pie. And the engines cheered. Diesel was sent home in disgrace. But the engines had learned a lesson. "Even troublesome trucks can do you a favor sometimes," chuffed Thomas. "Like getting rid of a smelly old Diesel," puffed Percy. Donald and Douglas are Scottish twin engines. They're practical, peppery, and proud. They nearly always work together. One day, Donald and Douglas were chuffing through the countryside, hauling a heavy load. Down the line, Trevor the traction engine had been struggling with a big cartload of hay. Crossing the tracks, the cart's wheels had broken off. Then Trevor heard a whistle. "Oh no!" Trevor cried. Donald could see the cart. "Stop!" he cried. Donald's driver applied the brakes, but it was too late. Luckily, no one was hurt. "Stop being pushy," Donald snapped. "Don't call me pushy," Douglas snapped back. "You shouldn't have pushed me into the cart," huffed Donald. "You pulled me, you mean," argued Douglas. "Didn't. Did. Did not. Did too." Before long, the track was cleared, and Donald and Douglas were on their way. The twins were so cross they refused to speak to each other for the rest of the day. The next day, Sir Topham Hatt needed an engine to help Duck at the smelter's yards. "May I go, sir?" said Donald eagerly. "I only need one engine," said Sir Topham Hatt, "not two." "I am only one engine, sir," said Donald, "and I would like to work with Duck." Sir Topham Hatt was surprised, but agreed. Thomas was worried. "Won't you miss one another?" he asked. "I know I'd miss Annie and Clarabelle. I'll work better on my own," sniffed Douglas. "I have work to do," huffed Donald. At first, Donald enjoyed working with Duck. Then things started to go wrong. "Did you shunt those freight cars onto the other line?" Donald asked. "You said you wanted them on the other line," Duck replied. "Not that other line, the other line." Donald was cross. Douglas would have known what I meant. He huffed. Douglas was working on his own. He chuffed dutifully through the beautiful countryside. But Douglas had no one to share it with. Although he tried not to, he was beginning to miss his twin. That night, Douglas's driver took him to visit Donald. "I was just passing," said Douglas. "Have you come to say you're sorry?" Donald sniffed. This made Douglas very cross. "I've nothing to be sorry for," he said, and steamed away in a huff. The next day, Donald was in a bad mood. Duck could see he was getting too close to the buffers. "Look out!" Duck shouted, but it was too late. Donald's driver was very cross. "This wouldn't have happened if you were working with Douglas," he said. Donald knew he was right, and Duck knew he couldn't pull Donald back onto the rails. So he went for help. Douglas was sadly finishing his work as Duck steamed into the depot. "Donald is in trouble," said Duck. "Donald in trouble," Douglas cried. "I'm on my way." And he steamed off as fast as he could. Douglas struggled and struggled. He finally pulled his twin gently back onto the tracks. He was relieved Donald wasn't hurt. "Thank you," Donald said, "and I'm sorry." "No, I'm sorry," said Douglas. "I'm sorry," insisted Donald. "Don't argue about who's sorry," chuckled Duck. "Just be glad you're back together." And they were. Sir Topham Hatt's engines are proud of how useful they are. It makes them feel important, but none of them feels more important than Gordon. "Watch out," Gordon wheezed. "You'll get my paint all sooty." "Pulling freight cars is a sooty job," teased Salty, "but then you wouldn't know." "Of course not," Gordon huffed importantly. "Express engines don't pull freight cars. It wouldn't be dignified." "Dinghy fried?" puzzled Percy. "What's that?" "Dignified," Gordon corrected. It means that someone's too big for his buffers," teased Salty. "Pah," said Gordon, and he puffed away. That evening, fog covered the island of Sodor. Everything slowed down, and soon the docks were packed with waiting freight cars. This caused confusion and delay. Sir Topham Hatt came to the sheds. He was in a great hurry. "Henry, Thomas, and Percy," he said, "you must go to the docks immediately." "Yes, sir," they whistled. Then Sir Topham Hatt turned to the big blue engine. "You too, Gordon," he said. "I need a big engine to take the freight cars where they won't be in the way." "Freight cars?" huffed Gordon. He could not believe what he had heard. Gordon wasn't happy to be pulling freight cars. He waited impatiently while they were shunted into place. Hurry up, chuffed Gordon crossly. "Why the rush, Gordon?" asked Thomas. "If I must pull freight cars, then I'll show Salty how an express engine pulls freight cars," Gordon huffed. "Careful, Captain," Salty tooted. "You don't want to get too big for your buffers." But Gordon ignored Salty. The next morning, Gordon raced along with his heavy load. "Now this is how you pull freight cars," he puffed. But the signalman had accidentally left the points switched to the branch line. Gordon rattled through the junction. "That's strange. I'm on the branch line." "Oh no," the signalman cried. "Express trains aren't supposed to go that way." It was too late. Gordon had already raced into the distance. The old branch line was weak and rusty. There were signs warning all the trains to go slow. But Gordon ignored the signs. "I'm an express engine. I don't go slow," he said. And he went even faster. The branch line couldn't take his weight, and the rails buckled. "Oh, help!" Gordon cried as he slid off the tracks and into a field. No one was hurt, but poor Gordon felt very undignified. "What will Sir Topham Hatt say?" he groaned. He found out soon enough. "Well, Gordon," said Sir Topham Hatt, "you wanted to show Salty a thing or two, and you've certainly done that. You've shown him how silly it is to ignore go-slow signs." "Sorry, sir," said Gordon, and he let out a sad wheesh of steam. Gordon was soon repaired and back at the docks ready for work, but he was very unhappy with himself. "Everyone makes mistakes," said Thomas. "Even you." "Salty's sorry he teased you," puffed James. "And I'm sorry I was too big for my buffers," chuffed Gordon. And all the engines gave a jolly toot. Even Gordon. Thomas chuffed along the branch line, thinking about his new friend Jack. "I hope he's doing better today," puffed Thomas. Yesterday, Jack had broken the rules and had gotten into trouble. The pack was widening the road beneath the old quarry bridge. Jack and Alfie were loading Max. Dust and dirt flew everywhere. Work had never been so much fun. Jack felt very proud. He had worked hard, been very good, and followed all the rules. But he was still worried Miss Jenny wouldn't let him stay. Ned, the steam shovel, was cheerfully clearing rocks. Ned has a big bucket and a big heart. Sometimes his bucket is too full. "Careful, Bumble Bucket." "Sorry," said Ned cheerfully. Thomas couldn't wait to get to the old bridge. He knew the pack was working there. He could see how Jack was doing. Back at the site, the foreman shouted, "Oliver, this topsoil needs moving now!" "I'll move it," cried Jack. "Jack!" Before anyone could stop him, Jack raced under the bridge. He was about to fill his bucket when he remembered Miss Jenny's warning. "Don't jump in where you don't belong." "Oliver," he said, "this is your job, not mine." "Thank you," said Oliver politely. "Well done, Jack," called Kelly. "Yes, well done," chimed Alfie and Isabella. Jack beamed proudly. Later, Ned was moving under the bridge. His oiler had told him to lower his crane arm. "I must be careful, I must be careful, I must be careful." Then there was trouble. Ned hadn't lowered his crane arm far enough. It knocked loose the important keystones. The bridge started to crumble. Thomas puffed towards the bridge, unaware of the danger ahead. "Thomas!" Jack jumped in and lifted his front loader up against the bridge. He pushed with all his might. Thomas saw the flagman. His driver applied the brakes, but it was too late. "Cinders and ashes!" cried Thomas. Jack didn't let go. Finally, Thomas's driver backed Thomas to safety. "Hold on, Jack!" called Kelly, and he rushed to help. Jack couldn't hold the bridge any longer. "Are you all right, Jack?" "I think so." Thomas brought Jack back to the yard. Jack was afraid Miss Jenny would be cross with him. After all, he had jumped in and damaged his arms. But Miss Jenny was pleased. "Spot on, Jack," she said. "You'd make a mother proud. And a tank engine grateful," Thomas chuffed. "It's off to the works with you tomorrow, Jack. The pack can't have a front loader with bent arms." "You mean I can stay?" "I wouldn't have it any other way," Miss Jenny grinned. "We're a cracking crew," laughed Kelly. "And all the better for Jack's being here," said Isabella. "Welcome to the pack, Jack," cheered Alfie. Jack was so happy he couldn't think of anything to say, so he just revved his engine and bounced his bucket. As Thomas steamed toward Tidmouth Sheds, he felt very happy. "Yes," he said, "welcome to the pack, Jack."